Welcome to the Women in Industry podcast. My name is Kirsty Davies-Chinnock, and today I'm joined by Sara Duff, who is a director of Smart Manufacture. Smart Manufacturer works with businesses in the manufacturing sector, from SMEs to mid-market, to streamline and automate their processes in the cloud to drive down costs, improve operational efficiencies, and to support remote working practices. They work with an ecosystem of best-of-breed partners who provide cloud-based software in the areas of e-commerce, ERP, CRM, digital work instruction software, and compliance management. And I have to say, Sara, I love your tagline on LinkedIn, helping the smart get smarter.
Thank you.
Welcome. You had quite a long-ranging background initially in specialising in telecommunications for the oil and gas industry, I believe. Tell me a little bit about that, because that's got to be, you don't think about it, but, telephone on an oil rig, it's not going to be your normal BT, is it?
No, it's not. So, I have spent 5 years selling into the oil and gas industry in my long career with BT after a number of different sales roles, business development, marketing roles in a number of different sectors. And it was an expanding sector, and I was sort of internally headhunted to go and join it. And it was really principally about expanding the presence of BT beyond just the UK and explaining to oil and gas companies that actually we could help them move away from very costly satellite services that they were using at the time to sort of providing sort of single voice data and video networks. Quite challenged being a woman at the time in the oil and gas industry. I do remember rocking up to a meeting with Chevron up in Aberdeen, taking over from a very technical guy, and that wasn't my background. It's very much sales and marketing, and I think the surprise on their faces just showed it. We carried on with the meeting, and the next month when I flew up, they said, "You were a bit of a surprise." And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And they said, "How did you know that?" And I said, "It was written all over your face." And they said,
Yes.
"Yeah, but after a half an hour, we realised how credible you were." And it was a pleasant change. So yeah, I had some great times. I learned a lot from working in that sector. They don't suffer fools gladly. They make great partners. They truly believe in collaboration, which is, I'm very passionate about, and continue in the work that we do. So a lot of lessons learned. It's interesting particularly about the digital oil field of the future and what I'm currently doing in manufacturing. And on the surface, you'd think, well, there's nothing in common, but actually there is an analogy, because the digital oil field was all about how you get the visualization of data from various offshore assets across the globe, present those in a single centralized platform so that you can really generate increased operational efficiency, production optimization, workflow automation. If you think what we do, particularly around MRP software for small businesses, it is all about joining up different departments, getting away from disparate spreadsheets, and giving small manufacturers that most important real-time visibility over their end-to-end operations. So it may seem a different world, but there's a lot in common.
I think it's moved forward quite a lot on, say, ERP software, whereas before it was just for the JLRs, the
Absolutely.
Caterpillar, the big companies, and the SMEs were just like, you can pay 100 grand for this, or carry on with your production board and your spreadsheets. Yep. And it's great to see that more and more SMEs are being able to access it through cloud technology. Do you find any resistance to it when you're trying to introduce it?
Yes, yeah, I do. I think there's one of the comments, and somebody made it to me a few weeks ago, about having the right open mindset. So we look for, and it tends to be mainly MDs, and at times it's production directors, as long as they have what we call an open mind. They may have been working their operation, they may be second, third generation. If it's a family business, they've always done things in that way, but they realise, spreadsheets are starting to creak at the seams. They know there's a different world out there. They're not quite sure what that world looks like. Maybe they haven't grown up with the technology, but they know there's a different way of doing things, and they've got that open mind. They're ready to bring their team of people with them. That's great. That's what we look for. There are still a stalwart of traditionalists out there who, the arms get folded. They tend to be the ones that we get introduced to by interim operations directors who've seen the world of ERP, know these guys are crying out, but if that open mindset isn't there, we're just pushing against a closed door. We've learned that. We've burnt a lot of hours trying to persuade those people, and it's an uphill battle. But as long as the mindset's there.
You mentioned that that there was a path between telecommunications and looking at improving data for SMEs. Was it a deliberate choice on your part to go, let's work with manufacturers? Did you fall into that? Was there a reason behind that?
Yeah, there's a sort of combined reason, I guess. My husband, who's alias our technical director, has spent many, many years in specifically in electronics manufacturing, putting in quality management systems, putting in ERP software, always in small manufacturing companies. So I learned a lot through obviously anecdotes from him, joining him in sort of factory visits, and coupled with that, I had unfortunately 4 in a row, I'd call them toxic employee engagements, where I just felt after the 4th one, there's got to be something different I can do. I've got a lot of experience, particularly in my sales training that I've had in working with very much process-driven organizations. Why don't I do something differently and take that experience and bring it to a different sector? And we originally, our original business, and it's still flourishing very well, is Smart Quality, which is all about helping companies understand the real value they can get from implementing ISO standards. And manufacturing is a big sector, along with construction, for adopting ISO standards. So that was the original business. We were exhibiting those services at manufacturing.
Smart Factory.
Southern Manufacturing.
Oh, yeah.
Me in the end, sorry. Southern Manufacturing back in February 2019. And we had an American company approach us on the stand. They had a piece of software they developed for what they call job shops, or what we'd call over here precision engineers. They wanted to expand into the UK. They could see that we were already doing quite a lot of work with smart quality in the manufacturing sector, coupled with my husband's experience, and said, you would make a great partner to work with us to help us expand. So we jumped on board with them. We launched the software back in the UK back in June at Subcon 2019. We did all the big manufacturing shows, and then unfortunately we were dealt quite a bad blow during first phase of COVID back in April 2020, and they said they hadn't seen the ROI they were expecting. COVID had really impacted the US market, so they'd made a decision without any discussion. They were exiting from the from the UK market, going back into the US. But obviously that left us with a huge amount of experience we'd had working in the UK manufacturing sector, a huge pipeline. So we did quite a bit of research of what other software that was specifically designed for small manufacturers, and that's really where we grew. And now we work alongside our independent manufacturing consultancy with a small number of software providers in the areas, as you said, of ERP, MRP, MES, CRM, and digital work instruction software. But that's how the business started.
And with your background being sales-based, telecommunications-based, and all that experience, does that give you an advantage when you're talking to your clients about ERPs, EMS systems, and as you say, they've got to have the open mindset, but they don't really know what it is they don't know? Or does that background help you?
I think it does. I think, always in all of the roles that I've had in the corporate world, in, very techy companies, I always had oodles of techy people that were there. And I remember in my first interview with BT, I said very openly, I don't know anything about telecoms. And they said, that's the reason we want you. I thought that was a bit strange. And then 2-3 weeks into it, when I was just met by oodles of technical people who really just didn't know how to position products in a customer facing way. They would bang on about all the features, to bore me to death, let alone the customer, without realizing, well, let's understand the customer's business, the challenges, and how, what are the benefits that technology can bring. So I've always prided myself on speaking the customer's language and trying to de-jargonize, remove all the technical acronyms, and I had to sort of often rehearse all the techies before I'd let them in a customer room to make sure that they were going to behave sensibly. And I think I've taken that into the world of manufacturing. Lots of the MDs I meet, their challenges are around, my spreadsheets are creaking at the seams. I haven't really got end-to-end visibility over what's actually going on in my operations. I want to increase my profitability. I'm worried about whether my quotes are actually accurate. They're going out the door. I've got a problem with my inventory management. I'm either overstocking or understocking. I want to be better at giving the right information to customers about when I'm going to deliver jobs. So my production scheduling needs to be optimized. So it's always in that language, and then how our software can support that, rather than talking Industry 4.0 and Smart Factory and God knows how many other acronyms that just put.
There are a lot of acronyms. I mean, this is a journey we've gone down over the last few years, and I don't understand half the things that we've invested in when they're in those jargon sort of phrasing. When someone says it's about improving productivity, it's about having a visible margin per job, per section, it's a lot easier to understand. And I know when we were accepting quotations and placing orders, the quotation I didn't have to sort of spend an hour translating definitely went to the head of the queue. So with your role now at Smart Manufacturer, what does a typical day look like? What do you do to sort of help your clients improve their margins and their productivity?
Yeah, a typical day, there's probably not such a thing as a typical, which is great, because what do they say? Variety spices up life, or whatever the phrase is. I love doing things differently. I'm a bit one of these lateral thinkers. I go from one direction, quite good at multitasking, as I think a lot of women are. So a typical day, a lot of the time, and we're very fortunate now that most of our business, not quite 100%, but getting close to it, is coming through referrals. So referrals from trade associations we're members of, referrals from existing customers that talk to their suppliers, or vice versa. So a lot of the time we're getting new inquiries in, we're talking to companies about their business, the business challenges, and explaining what we do. We also, I mentioned about collaboration. I'm very passionate about collaboration. We work with a lot of other consultants who work in the manufacturing sector who have complementary services to ourselves. So we get lots of referrals from them. Equally, we go to them. So there's lots of sort of collaboration conversations. We spend also quite a lot of time with our software partners, sort of sharing details of our prospect base, getting an understanding of their roadmaps. And then equally, because of the trade associations we belong to, other manufacturing groups, I spend quite a lot of time, in various manufacturing groups, again, sharing information with others, sharing experiences, which I really enjoy. You can learn a lot from that.
I was just about to say, or ask next, I actually wrote down while you were talking there, when you mentioned about referrals, to ask about your views on collaboration. And then without me having to ask it, you went straight into collaboration. I do like that. One of the things that I've really seen a change in the metals industry since COVID is the rise of collaboration. It was always there to an extent, but a lot more people are now going, look, we've come through this, we've come through that, we've had all these crises in industry. We're stronger together, and collaboration is going to be a key part of that. Is that something that you're seeing with your clients as well?
Yeah, so we see, and particularly I think in one specific area, I know obviously there's still a huge number of open vacancies in the manufacturing sector. And I think some people who've been looking for specialist skills to bring those internally in a company have suddenly realised, well, rather than try and fight with all these other companies to find those same skill sets, why don't we focus on what are our core competencies, and these other areas then will collaborate with those companies who are more specialist in those areas. So I've certainly seen that. I've seen the rise of a number of sort of what I call manufacturing collaboration initiatives. So the Connex initiative that was started by and founded by Sam Bainham, which was originally very much a Cornwall and Devon group. I think when we were living at the time in Bristol, we're now living in Dorset, we were one of the furthest sort of west, and now it's very much a UK-wide group. And I think Sam's done a fantastic job in making sure it's not just a networking group, it is a group of developers and manufacturers and true collaboration and working together on projects. Yeah, so that's a fantastic initiative. There's others, but that's the one that comes to the foreground.
There are so many out there that just have really stepped up and are working for their membership, and it's great to see. And within those sectors, you develop your own relationships. And in previous episodes, people have spoken about their manufacturing mates. You mentioned Sam there as well. Are there any people in particular who've influenced, you know, your career path and perhaps moving into more of the manufacture side?
Yeah, so obviously the number one influencer I had that I've already mentioned is my husband, and I continue to learn from his in-depth experience, both in the manufacturing sector and specifically with ERP software and systems. So that's been a great influence and continues to be. But from from others in the industry and people who inspire me and keep me motivated. So obviously, I've mentioned Sam. There's Andrea Wilson from Honall and the incredible work she's doing, spearheading this wonderful crusade for getting a minister for manufacturing. Yeah, she's
Definitely.
tirelessly campaigning. And the other lady who absolutely springs to mind is Angela Lawler and the great work she does in getting the message out about the manufacturing sector to the schools and colleges. So I would see all those three as being key inspirational, and they motivate me with the work that they do. So I would definitely name those three.
I'd agree. I've spoken to both Andrea and Angela, and they're just absolutely fantastic. Every time I see one of Andrea's LinkedIn posts, my head starts going votes for women. I know it's votes for a minister for manufacturing, but I just get the votes for women in my head, and every single time. So if you look back at your career, obviously it was quite defined in the oil and gas sector with telecommunications for a period of time. And then now you're still communicating, but in a different sector. So if you look back, when you were 15, do you think your career path would have gone like this? Would 15-year-old Sara think you'd be doing this now?
I know, absolutely not. And there's lots of colleagues in the telecom sector that do a double take and send me a message and go, is that the same Sara Duff? Gosh, you've moved many roles and they're still doing the same role when I last, worked with them back in the mid 80s. But no, very much when I was 15, I was in a very academically orientated school, preparing for my O levels, thinking what A levels I was going to do. And very much, it was fortunate I was academic, but I think I missed out on lots of practical skills. And I remember my first couple of lessons doing domestic science, which I absolutely hated, and going to my teacher going, I'd rather do woodwork, being told at that point, girls are not allowed to do woodwork. You do domestic science, which is, laughable now. I still can't cook, and my family will testify to that. Unfortunately, my husband's a great cook, but I think I missed out in that respect. But yeah,
I think
different.
it's quite difficult at school, isn't it? Because I know when I was I was the first year that did GCSEs. So, and our stream weren't allowed to do typing or anything like that. And all I do all day is sit at keyboard. I'd love to be able to type properly. And again, we had to take domestic science and we had to take sewing, but we were allowed to take woodwork and metalwork.
I think you're younger than me, and probably that came in after my days. But yeah, it was quite frustrating. Interestingly, my husband still says I'd have loved to have done domestic science, but yeah, he's learned cooking through a different means.
It's one of those things. They're skills that everybody needs. We all need to be able to feed ourselves. We all need to sew a button on a shirt. And we all need to be able to do basic aspects with wood and metal.
Yeah, no, I love that.
So what advice would you give a young woman looking to join a manufacturing industry?
Yeah, firstly, I'd say irrespective of where they are in the country, go and look out, go and find some local manufacturers, go and see them. And I think what I often find, not in all cases, but some manufacturers are doing some fantastic work, but they're not necessarily the greatest people of communicating that in terms of
Mm.
what's on their websites and their collateral. So go out and see them, look at what they're actually doing, hear the passion, because I very rarely meet a small manufacturer that isn't passionate about the work they do, and look at all the different roles that are available. It's not just shop floor, as there's roles in sales, in marketing, in purchasing, in many different other roles. I would say also look to see if it's possible to do a short-term summer placement. We've got the National Manufacturing Day coming up on the
Yes.
28th of September. That's another great opportunity. But also seek out some role models. I mean, I've just recently joined a Dorset in Technology group, Women in Technology Dorset, WITD. Yeah, that's an acronym, isn't it? There's a whole range of women in different roles in technical IT companies, but also manufacturing companies of different ages, and there's lots of sharing of experiences going on. So that's quite a good opportunity as well for those type of groups. There's a whole multitude of different options.
Again, it's back to the collaboration, and that can't be understated how important that is, I don't think, in manufacturing as a whole. And what is the best advice that you've ever been given?
Yeah, I've got two pieces. If I'm greedy enough to share two with you. So
Feel free.
the first piece is put your heart and soul into everything. I think my mother's phrase was, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I've always tried to do that, to put 150% into everything I do. And as an interesting anecdote from my past, you're mentioning secretarial. After I graduated, I did a short course in secretarial studies, which I hated, but I was told it was a way into a marketing role, which I so desperately wanted. During the first few months, I think it was 3 or 4 months of the role as a marketing secretary in ICL as was, or now Fujitsu, I volunteered to do editing of newsletters, help support out at events. And I was sort of rewarded just under 6 months into that role by being asked if I wanted to take the full-time role as events manager on, which was great. I ended up taking a 40-foot truck around hospital sites with ICL hardware and various third-party software. So there's probably not that many hospitals I haven't visited across the UK. But
That sounds fantastic.
that all came through that extra effort and going that extra mile. So that's one piece of advice. The other piece comes from the oil and gas background about the importance of learning from every experience, and I'm a great believer in that, whether it's positive or negative. After that experience, stand back, look at what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, so from that experience, what would you do differently next time? But then importantly, move on. If it's been a negative experience, what's not good is constantly dwelling on the negative. It's learning from that, but then moving on. I think most people who know me would describe me as she's a lady that's glass half full. I'm a realist, and I have to be in terms of what I do, but also I always try and look for the positive side, because I think too often people, if they have had some sort of negative experience or failure, they can get very entrenched in that failure, and it's quite difficult to surface out of that. So important to learn, but then move on.
I think part of that, particularly for women in leadership roles, sort of mixes with the sort of imposter syndrome. Whereas, if they got 99 out of 100, they'll focus on the one question they got wrong
Yeah.
rather than 99 they got right. And everybody makes mistakes. Nobody gets it right all the time. And with regard to the glass being half full, just drink whatever's in the glass.
Yeah, particularly of an evening after a hard
Yeah,
day.
most definitely. Sara, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been lovely to talk to you.
And likewise, it's been a pleasure talking to you too, Kirsty. Thank you.